We are delighted that you're joining us for another podcast of Wake Up Aligned, and it is the podcast for chiropractors where we get to talk about chiropractic lifestyle, and topics of interest. You can contact us through our email, and that is mailbag@amcfamily.com. Hello, everybody. Welcome back. I'm sitting across the table from Tom Owen. Tom, how are you doing today?
I'm doing great, man. Looking forward to the subject today.
I am too. My name is Dr. Shannon McMurtry. I'm your host for this podcast, this Wake Up Aligned thing that we're doing. Today, our topic is persistence. Inside of our AMC Aligned family, we are this year doing a monthly focus, and the monthly focus is a big concept or a kind of a bigger topic that will be good for a whole month of effort or focus. And we've done enthusiasm, and the next month coming up is persistence. So I thought it'd be good for us to do a podcast on persistence. And I know that when we were speaking about this at breakfast, you were like, I can do a whole one on persistence myself. And I kind of feel the same, right? There's certainly, you've been through the struggle. You've had the battles. We've all had the opportunities to decide if we're going to stick with it or do something else. So I thought that would be very valuable to share with our listeners today. I want to start off with some shout outs, if you don't mind.
Sure. Let's go that route.
Yeah. So the first is Doctors Hedges and Guadalupe, right? They are doing, so far this year, they're doing better than they've ever done before. And their mentor, Dr. Tara, has been mentioning them several times on our weekly conference. And they started off the year with new patients, and the second and third week, new patients still coming in. Had an opportunity just to chat with them recently. And in spite of like the snow and other things going on in their area, they are staying with thinking the right things, hanging around the right people. And that was the key that Dr. Tara said, last year when it wasn't going so well, they didn't have the right staff people. They had hired the wrong people. They weren't the good matches. Something would go wrong, and that would completely jerk the rug out from under them. And then that would spiral into, I don't think I can do it, or this is a problem. And they would start to feed off each other. And then you know how this goes. We look for proof of that outside. So calling around other people, is it bad in your area? Are you having trouble? Oh yeah, it's really tough here. So we start to get that like believed because it's confirmed by other people. Well, they stopped doing most of that. They stopped doing that thing where they're looking for other people to prove the bad and prove the negative. And here's an illustration of what they're doing this year. So Dr. Hedges reached out to, I believe it was the YMCA, and said, hey, we'd love to come out there, do a screening and that kind of thing, and introduce what we do to your people. And got a no. No, I don't think we're interested in that. Dr. Tara said that last year he would have taken that no and said, oh, okay. And then that was it, right? This year, because of persistence, it's a different animal entirely. So got the no. And he said, well, what about a stress reduction lecture? A what? Yeah, a lecture on stress reduction. Oh, I'd be very interested in that. And not just for the YMCA in their area, but for all the YMCAs that this person really directs and oversees. So by being persistent, by sticking with it, he got something potentially that's far greater than his original scope to begin with. So I'm really, really proud of that couple. The best is yet to come for them, but it's all coming back to that concept we're going to talk about today, and that's
and they're already seeing results. Oh. I mean, so the statistics are already being impacted and moving up from that. And, whenever, I know you brought another shout out and we can jump into this subject here in a few minutes, but really, you're not going to be persistent on anything without, first of all, identifying the purpose.
Right.
Right. you're not going to pursue past all the objections, all the distractions, all the, the outside influences, all the naysayers. You're not going to be persistent with anything without a particular purpose, a vision, and ultimately a commitment. And we'll unpack that here in a minute. I know you've got another shout out.
Actually, I think I want to say that for the end. We'll wrap it up because I think the results that this person achieved is really just exemplifying the subject that we're going to talk about. So is that okay?
Sure, absolutely. So on that, I'll just grab it for a moment that, just over the years of my own experience and then the mentoring of as many as I've been involved with, persistence, or another word is consistency, is the biggest component that I have found over the years. That's the biggest key, more than intelligence, more than talent. Most of the time that all my experiences have shown, it's normally not the smartest person in the room. It's normally not the most talented person in the room. The one that wins and wins big long term is the most consistent. All right. So consistently applying the principles, consistently applying those factors is going to win out above, the one that has all the personality, or the one that has all the talent. You would think, oh, they're going to win. Well, no, they don't have the work ethic. They don't have the consistency. They don't have the persistence. So it's hard to be consistent without some persistence, meaning, all right, yeah, consistently applying, consistently working, but that's the persistence. What makes those two words so different? Persistence is the overcoming factor, because you're going to get resistance. You're going to get resistance from life. Life keeps coming.
Oh, yeah.
Just because I have, a positive mental attitude and I'm going to be an overcomer and I'm going to be persistent, it doesn't stop life from knocking me from, to and fro. I've given that analogy of, being the captain on my boat, right? And I've got my heading. I know where I want to go, but the seas are pushing me to the left or the right. The wind's hitting me in the face or whatever. I've got headwinds, all that stuff. There's still dangers in the water, but it's that persistence, it's that consistently following and knowing exactly where I'm going. And I think that comes back to everyone's going to deal with the fight. Everyone's going to deal with the challenges. Life doesn't allow it not to. But I think the biggest key is what's the purpose behind it, right? That's why I think a statistic that has stood true for decades is why 9 out of every 10 new businesses fail within the first 5 years. And the ones that survive the first 5 years, 8 to 9 out of those 10 are going to fail within 10 years. And why is that? Because if the business was started for just the reason to make money, it's not a very big purpose. If you have a big purpose, a big identity, a big calling, a big vision, then you're going to overcome all the things that everyone's going to deal with. And so you've got to have that purpose. The purpose allows you to eventually have what I'm going to call a made-up mind moment. All right. So the made-up mind moment is another term, is a line in the sand moment of you just make up your mind, come hell or high water, I'm not going to be deterred. Because without that, you're not going to be consistent, and you're certainly not going to persevere or have persistence over the long term. So in order for me to talk about persistence for an entire show, yeah, we can talk about all the consistently applying a work ethic, the principles, and so on. First and foremost, listeners, you got to make up your mind. And everybody says, well, I can make up my mind. I make up my mind. I'm going to go see a movie this afternoon. That's not the same, right? If I made up my mind I was going to go see a movie this afternoon, but I ran into 3 different detours on the way, and then they had road construction, and then there was a car accident, and then I had a flat tire, most people are going to turn around and go back home and not see the movie, right? But if I had my mind made up, nope, there's a showing tonight at 11 p.m., and I still can make it to the theater, then I made my mind up I was going to go see the movie. Making your mind up is what presses you through being persistent. And I'll throw it back to you here, Dr. Shannon. That's why you've got 9 out of 10 people failing. Now, granted, you've got to have all the right business principles. You got to have the systems. You got to have all those components. But what's gonna see it through for the long term is the person that's going to be willing to persevere. And you're not going to do that. You're not going to sacrifice. The average person's not going to go through the pain. They're not going to go through the sacrifice if they have not made their mind up. Making your mind up. That's why I wrote a book about it. Nothing's more powerful. Nothing's more powerful than a made-up mind. The world will step aside for the man or woman that knows where he's going with persistence, determination, and desire. Give me those 3 components. It's funny how all the rest of the stuff kind of falls in place, right? It's kind of like you were just giving that example. He was told no to screenings, but he wasn't, that's not going to stop me. So
right.
He persevered, came at it with a different angle, and all of a sudden, wow, he had no idea that all the YMCAs would be available for a speaking engagement, right? But it was, if the persistence wasn't there, but that drive of I'm not going to be turned away, he wouldn't have those opportunities falling in his lap.
I'm doing a class on this very subject later today, and you mentioned the world will step aside. That's one of my bullet points right there on that class. You also mentioned that made up mind, line in the sand moment, and how, your purpose gives you that motivation to continue in spite of the bad circumstance or the thing you didn't expect. We have a saying when we set goals, as soon as you make a commitment, as soon as you stick your neck out there, the test is coming, right? And that's true for this made up mind too. If you have the audacity to look yourself in the mirror and say, I am committed to X, Y, and Z, no matter what, guess what? You have just invited the test, whatever it may be, to show up at your front door. And it will. Don't grouse about it. Celebrate it when it happens. We have doctors who say, I'm going to attend every summit this year. That's on my goal list. I promise you, there's going to be a flight that's canceled. There's going to be a flat tire getting to the airport. There's going to be a hotel that's sold out. There's going to be a circumstance that they're going to have to navigate through, because all of us have to navigate through, right? That test will always come. You also mentioned and I've heard you say this quote multiple times. It's not the most talented or the smartest. It's the consistent person. It's that person's going to be persistent. For that class that I'm doing, there's a quote by Einstein. You're probably not aware of this. You know who Einstein is, though, right?
I've heard of him.
Okay, very good. All right. He didn't do anything with boats, so I wasn't so sure about you. This is from Einstein. Considered to be a smart guy, maybe? All right. It's not that I am so smart. It's just that I stay with problems longer. That's Albert Einstein. Another quote, excuse me, another quote by friend of your father's, Napoleon Hill. It says, patience, persistence, and perspiration make an unbeatable combination for success. Right? Just goes into what we're talking about today. When I think about persistence, I think about a time in my life that I had to decide, was I going to tuck my tail between my legs and give up, or was I going to stick with it? And that was in chiropractic school. In chiropractic school, I think it was my second trimester, biochemistry. That was my nemesis. Didn't like biochemistry. It didn't like me. And I missed the grade I needed by like 2 points. Now, what that did was it triggered a low trimester GPA. And at Parker, you had to keep a cumulative GPA above a certain threshold. And you also had to have a trimester GPA above a certain threshold. My cumulative was fine. My trimester wasn't. So I got a lovely little letter in the mail that said, we're inviting you to take a trimester off from your college, your chiropractic education. Now that was quite the gut punch. I was in Dallas, Texas by myself, had an apartment rented, everything was going through student loans, just like most chiropractic school students do. And I spent a day with myself in my apartment by myself, deciding what I was going to do because of that letter. And my decision, I wouldn't be here today had I made a different decision, obviously. So I decided, well, I got 4 months. I got to have living expenses. And here's the kicker. You don't have any student aid. You have no loans for that next trimester when they accept you back in. If you reapply and you're accepted, it's a conditional thing. So I had to save up. I had to pay for my expenses for 4 months. I had to save up tuition and expenses for another 4 months. I had 16 weeks to do it. So I had a history of waiting tables, bartending at Chili's. There was a Chili's just down the street from my apartment. So I went that day and I applied for a job, got it. I was working 50, 60 hours a week. They were trying to keep me away from it because I was getting too much overtime. Of course, as a server, you're only making $2 and some change an hour, so it's not like it was killing them. But in that 4 months, I paid for all my expenses, all my gas, my food, everything else, saved up the money for tuition, saved up the living expenses for the next 4 months, re-enroll back into chiropractic school, and the rest is history. See, up until that moment, I'd never been almost a failure at something that I'd set my mind to. I'd always been able to put it together and do enough to bring it across the finish line. But that was a real gut check moment for me. And I'm so grateful that I did that, not because I became a chiropractor and I was able to do something that I love. I'm grateful that I did that because it gave me a belief in myself that up until that moment, I didn't know I had. See, I knew that I had been tested like you were talking about on other episodes. And that gives me confidence moving forward. So I don't know if I'd shared that with everybody or not, but yeah, that really happened to me.
And most people that have acquired a long-term success, it did not just happen to them. Most people have that line in the sand moment somewhere along the way. But, when I think of the consistency and the persistence, I also think of kind of our chiropractic society, a chiropractic world, or maybe some of our listeners, that's a big missing component. First of all, there's not a lot of the chiropractors going to school with the chiropractic big idea, right? They didn't have chiropractic impact their life. They went there. A lot of people are graduating school because they went to a school event where, it might be a good career path. So number one, maybe or maybe not, they're coming out of school with a big enough vision, a big enough purpose. And then there's so much of society, and this isn't just for chiropractors, but it is the chiropractors because you're all part of the same society. The society is trying to teach you to take the path of least resistance and take the easy route, which leads you to this constant, and this is not a compliment. It's not meant to be a compliment because I view it as a form of weakness when you're constantly looking for the short route, when you're constantly looking for the shortcut or the easy road, and that's how you bounce around. You never, I love all these cool quotes. It says, "Man is dust, dust settles. Be a man." settle on something and own it. And very few people, they tap around, they go around and they just dabble in all these different systems, or they're looking for, in chiropractic practice, they're dabbling in this technique, they dabble in that technique, they dabble in functional medicine, they dabble in nutrition, they jump around from this firm to that firm, they go from this management company to this system and this system, and they always stay on surface level. Like if they come around AMC and Align, you've been around now for 20 plus years, Shannon, you know exactly what I'm talking about. The people that stick, the people that go subterranean, right? They go below the surface level of the procedures and they start learning and getting and mastering the conceptual components, the human nature components, the genius that's inside the system.
Right.
How do you get there? If you're constantly on the surface, you're not committed to anything, right? That's what you're telling me. You're telling if you're one of those people that just bounce around all the time and you're always trying the new ticket, the new golden, piece of equipment, the shiny new toy, you're not committed to anything. You never make a real commitment, and then that doesn't give you a chance to consistently apply the principles. And that's another thing I love about the Align system. It's all principle based. I don't have to think about it. I don't have to figure it out. It's already been figured out. Look at, you just quoted Albert Einstein, and I'm sitting here talking about a principle as if it's something new, right? I wrote a book about it as if I created that principle. No, the principle of commitment tied with consistency or persistence. That's really what that is. The word persistence is the combination of commitment and consistency. That's what the word persistence is. You're committed. You're going to be persistent to consistently apply or go out, pursue whatever you're trying to do. So anyway, how does it relate to a chiropractic practice? In my mind, what are you consistently applying? What are you consistently striving to master? Not just dabble in. What are you becoming a master of? Do you truly own a vehicle that can carry you to the destination that you think you want? And it's not going to happen by just sporadically being talented, right? Or you're going to outsmart everybody. No, eventually you're going to have to consistently and persistently proceed and persevere through all the challenges that take place inside of any business and all the challenges that take place outside with all the outside influences of that business.
You're talking about people who choose the easier path, choose the shortcut, whatever. When I was studying for this class, I was reading about people who had persistence in their life, persistence at some point. And if Richard Branson had chosen the easy path, there wouldn't be Virgin Atlantic, Virgin Airways. He wouldn't have created the wealth that he has and the wealth in the shareholders because he's dyslexic. Dyslexia, for some people, is like, well, that's why I can't. He didn't let that stop him. What if Warren Buffett hadn't been persistent? Did you know when he was in college, he was so terrified of public speaking, he dropped his speech class, which was required for his major. Now, you wouldn't know that now because part of his whole life is speaking to thousands of shareholders, speaking on TV, speaking on the radio. Speaking is what he does. But there he was as a college kid, literally so terrified of it that he couldn't stay in the class. Well, what if that had been his lot in life? A lot of people would have missed out on some real financial blessings. Robin Williams, painfully shy, awkward, very anxious as a child, and does what? Goes into entertainment, where if you don't know anything about Robin Williams, his brand of stand-up comedy was really groundbreaking. He didn't approach the stage with a script or sets. He was just stream of consciousness in the moment. So not only did he have social anxiety and all that stuff and shyness, he decided, I'm going to get out on stage with nothing but me and my creative spirit. And look what he did. Look at the people that he entertained. Colonel Sanders. I know that sounds silly, but wasn't it? He tried all these different things and all these different career paths. And at 70, he came up with his secret recipe. The rest is history. Thomas Edison. See, it's all around us. And we think that those people, well, they must have something extra. They must have had something special. They don't know what I'm dealing with. Well, you don't know what they're dealing with either. And I just thought that was very interesting because we tend to get very myopic. We tend to get very like in our own little world, and you don't understand me. You don't understand my struggles. Hey, we can sit here and talk about your struggles, or we can sit here and talk about your ability to be consistent and persistent in spite of them, because it's true for all these other people, and it's true for you and me. We used to start off, I don't even know if we still, but we used to start off this whole relationship in AMC with a book called The Go-Getter, right? The Go-Getter, listeners, if you're not familiar with The Go-Getter, it's a book written by Peter B. Kine, I believe, Kine, and it is a modern day parable about a character named William Peck. And William Peck in that book is the personification of persistence. All right. I see you nodding your head there. What do you want to share?
I was just going on the component of, as I was listening to this, it reminded me of breakfast earlier this morning. I was downstairs waiting for you to meet me for breakfast. And there was this, it's an open air restaurant there and there was this kind of like you could tell it was a business breakfast taking place. And it was some kind of a team of managers. I wasn't quite sure what business it was, but they kept talking about leadership. And the word that kept being said at this table, I'm sitting there trying to eat my breakfast, but this is how innately I cannot hear this without it, just echoing in my ears. I can't, there's the word can't. I don't know how to operate when I'm hearing this. So there was this young lady, probably 30-ish, and in this meeting, and she just kept saying over and over and over, you can't develop leadership skills in all type of psychological makeups. She just kept saying, you can't. And I'm sitting there eating my eggs going, that's right. You can't as long as you keep saying you can't. And it reminded me of what I teach my kids. Right? Listen, folks, if I'm willing to teach my kids this stuff and then I share it with you, I must know something, because I'm not going to just pass along garbage to waste my kids' times. But if they want to really stir dad up, let me hear my daughter say, I can't.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, it just stops everything in the house. I'll say, Michaela, whether you say you can or you can't, either way, you're right. Because, I mean, she's going to leave my house one day, 18, 20, 23, something. But she's going to go out of there with a few things. And she's going to go out with that affirmation that I've fed into her from day one, that she's strong, confident, and capable. And she's going to walk out of there going, I can accomplish anything I set my mind to. There's no such thing as word as can't. But I can assure you, when we're talking about persistence and we're talking about that objection and the fight, you could have easily, when you got that letter from school, well, I can't survive for 4 months, right? Sure. All the word has to come out of your mouth is to say, I can't, rather than I will.
And I know you're on the track here, but you know what's really bad about that? Had I packed up my stuff and drove back home to Tennessee, you know what my family would have said to me? It's okay. You did your best.
You did the right thing.
Right. Everybody would have affirmed that decision. Right? And that's what's so insidious about what we're talking about here, right? If you make that decision to give up, you're going to get confirmation that that was the right decision by the people who are, have your best interest in mind.
So when I say that, when we talk about this line in the sand moment, we talk about this made up mind moment, it all ties back to that simple lesson that I'm teaching my kids. Hey kids, whether you say you can or you can't, either way, you're right. Now that doesn't mean, kids, Drew, Michaela, doesn't mean it's going to be easy. I didn't tell you you weren't going to get a bloody nose out of it. I didn't tell you weren't going to hit rock bottom.
Right.
Forget rock bottom. I can remember when I used to have to look up at the bottom.
Right.
Right. But at all times, the principles were available to me. Right. And as long as I got air in my lungs, I can, as long as I'm willing to persevere and be persistent. All right. Don't put it on a timetable that oh my gosh, if things don't turn around within 2 weeks, this, and that. You can't put you have to be persistent. And that's why I'll take those components over talent and smarts every time, because those two babies, they come with that commitment or that persistence, and maybe they don't. And that's why they'll lose every time. Not every time. I mean, you got some smart people that become successful, but you can go to the Steve Jobs and go back and read their stories and see how much resistance they got. Now, how many other Steve Jobs were out there? How many others you can name then? You mentioned Colonel Sanders, right? Mm-hmm. How many more out there? Well, there's thousands, if not millions of them. Everybody, opportunity knocks for everybody, but very few people are either prepared to recognize it as an opportunity. And then secondly, so few of them are willing to act on it. And then thirdly, those that recognize and then they act on it, the first bit of resistance, like you said, they get the letter in the mail and they go back home and their friends, their family affirm, that come on back to where it's safe. We'll get the job down at the factory and everything will be fine. And you know what? You could have still had a great life, good life.
Absolutely.
And you're right. Things will work out. But how committed are you to that path? And I asked the chiropractor as I finish up my part here, how committed to that path are you really engaged with? To what level are you committed to that success? What commitment level are you to that practice? And maybe you're not going to be able to keep bouncing around, dabbling here, dabbling there. Maybe you need to just, man is dust, dust settles. Be a man, be a woman, and stick to the part and do whatever's necessary.
You mentioned that you wrote a book about this subject, or this is part of the what the book is about. But these aren't new concepts. These aren't new. Albert Einstein we've quoted. I'm going to throw out a name. I'm going to take a bet here that you probably don't know who this person is. Ella Wheeler Wilcox. Got any idea who that is, Tom? Ella Wheeler Wilcox.
Well, I'm going to say no, but for some odd reason, that kind of sounds familiar.
All right.
Maybe you have shared this one with me before.
Maybe I have. I don't know. And even if you don't know that name, you're going to instantly recognize what I'm going to share with you next, which is her poem. One ship drives east and another drives west with the self-same winds that blow. 'Tis the set of the sails and not the gales which tells us the way to go. Like the winds of the seas are the ways of fate as we voyage along through life. 'Tis the set of the soul that decides its goal and not the calm or the strife. That was one of your dad's favorites. And I'd be remiss if we didn't at least mention that poem on this one on persistence. That poem comes up in my life multiple times. So if that's the first you've heard of that, if you're a listener, that's Ella Wheeler Wilcox. She's the author of that poem. You can Google her and get that printed off if you need to. So let me finish with, go ahead.
Yeah, that was what I said.
Yeah, finish with the shout out.
You had a shout out that you wanted to
So
wrap this up with.
Dr. Amanda Austin, dear friend of yours, dear friend of mine. She actually taught me how to do spinal screenings way back in the day. Now I have the privilege of mentoring her, and she is persistence personified. 2021 was a rough year for her, rough year for the clinic. Not a bad year, but just a challenging year. We came into 2022 and we had a lot of internal strife in her office. And I reached a point where I said, I'm not sure any of the people in your office are salvageable, are really worth all this extra effort and all this turmoil and torment. So I'd recommend that we just broom and clean house and start over again. And she wouldn't let that happen because she saw the value in them that I didn't see. And I don't get to say that I'm wrong a lot, especially when it comes to reading the stats and all that. But in the case of her staff, I was completely wrong about that staff. They were salvageable. And she persistently poured into that team and called more of her own leadership out and put it into practice in her clinic, leading the team successfully, leading the team really to their best year, highest patient visits in her history, highest percentage of patients pre-scheduled, which is a staff-driven thing, double the referrals of last year, best acceptance ratio of her career, highest percentage of missed appointments rescheduled, highest services ever rendered, highest collections, right? They accomplished all of this in a market that is a pretty good sized market, Chattanooga, Tennessee. No external marketing whatsoever. It was all internal. It was all that desire to see the people that she had assembled perform up to their potential and her leading them to do so. So I need to not only shout out to Dr. Amanda, I need to tell that whole team I was wrong, they were right, and they have really impressed me with what they put together last year, and I'm expecting big things out of them this year.
That's no small practice either. Talking about history with Dr. Amanda, I actually opened that practice myself. I literally was over there painting the walls and all of that way back in the 90s when we helped launch that practice for her. So I'm aware of the history there, and to say that she did all of that with those challenges, that's no small feat. You know, another point that I would want to have you can expand on is, I say that she's been in practice for all those years. I tell you that she's been successful for all these years. And the listener out there just thinks, well, success means life is rosy and you have lots of roses and lollipops, right?
No.
Dr. Amanda has a lot of challenges outside the practice where she should have the ability to say, I can't consistently go for this. Absolutely. I can't persistently, acquire that, right? She's got more than enough resistance, distractions, objections, whatever you want to call it, that she could easily use that word that I don't let my kids say.
Mm-hmm.
She could easily say, I can't. But Dr. Amanda never has, because there's health challenges in her family that she has to deal with, but she still overcomes. And she is certainly a diamond in all of our hearts, for sure.
Absolutely. Any final words on persistence? Yeah. So listeners, you're going to hear us talk about our consistency, but I want you to know we are persistent. We are persistent in what we do. We are persistent in serving you and reaching out to chiropractors so that they can reach their potential. We take it very seriously, and we're always looking to lean into that mission, not run away from that mission. And we hope that you will join us in the future. Follow our show. You can share it with friends, of course, and we'd love for you to contact us at mailbag@amcfamily.com. In addition, you're always invited to attend or join us at a summit. Of course, registration is required. And we'd love for you to check out the loads of free content we provide to social media every single week. Until next time.